Brady, what's up, man? Great to see you. I've been following you on the gram for years now. So to be able to make this work is an honor for me.
Well, that's an honor for me to hear you say that. It's actually likewise honor. I've been following you, Order Man, for many years. What you're doing to help men is beyond reproach, and I appreciate you. Thanks for having me on today.
Yeah, you bet. No, you say to help men, and that is our goal. But it's also just to help me. like I feel like I need the most help. I had a buddy just the other day. He made an awesome post on Instagram, and him and I have talked about these things. And he says, a lot of the times the things that I post, this is him talking, are reminders for him. It's almost a personal journal as much as it is, even more so than it is telling other people how to live. And I've certainly found that to be the case. So when I say we should do this, I should really be saying I should do this. I need to be better at this, that kind of thing.
Brother, it's so funny you should say that because a lot of the things that I talk about on Instagram with my posts, it's really just me talking to myself with an audience and holding myself accountable in front of other people. Because I think we need that, right? I think we all need to be held accountable to a certain degree, whether it's not ourselves but other people. And then I think it's almost a litmus test to see if people really are thinking like us. But why should we care if people think like us, right? We should almost ask ourselves that. But in the sense, we all are part of this terrible condition called the human condition, for which there is no cure. And so, no matter who you are, you're still part of this human condition. We what we do every day.
Yeah. Yeah. I've thought about this concept of accountability that you're saying. And I think it is important. I think the concept of accountability is crucial. It's unfortunate that myself and so many other men that we talk with, their sole source of accountability is through social media. And I'm learning like I got to
It's
have guys in my corner to hold me accountable. I don't need faceless, nameless strangers. I need real human beings, real brothers who see me struggle, see what I'm good at. I see them struggle. I know what they're good at, and they're intimately familiar with my life and vice versa.
I agree. I think your brother should hold you accountable, the men in your life. But you know who actually really holds me accountable the most is my wife and my daughter.
Hmm.
That who holds me accountable because my wife is my partner. Uh, and if she sees me struggle, or if I have, we had a great conversation this morning. We have conversations, and she'll tell me her opinions, and that's in reality the only opinion that really matters to me most is my wife's opinion because I live with her. I'm a partner with her in raising my child and creating this life that we want to live. And so those are the two people really, and my daughter, you know. And of course, I hold my wife accountable. I hold my daughter accountable. Right? It's a partnership, right? And my daughter is my daughter. She's my child. So of course, I hold her accountable to anything, making sure she's acting right, studying and stuff like that. But I think as men, those of us who are married with families need to look within our families to our wives for accountability and to our children to make sure that we're doing the right thing as well.
How do you personally balance that? I've been pretty open about my relational struggles over the past several months. How do you balance the idea that you're saying of accountability with your spouse with not dumping all your baggage on her? Because I think that's the opposite end of the spectrum, and that's what guys see. Either I can be a bumbling, babbling idiot in front of my wife, or I can be this guy who doesn't share anything and is locked down like a vault. How do you and I tended to go more towards that side, like, hey, I'm not going to share that with her. I don't want to burden her. Like my motives were pure, I think, and yet maybe execution left something to be desired.
Trust is such a huge implement when it comes to relationships. I trust that, look, my wife is allowed to have her opinions of me, right? At the end of the day, if she didn't want to be here, she would leave. And look, we can't control that. We can't control what people want to do with their lives, right? If I share issues with my wife, if I share problems that I have or anxieties that I have with her, and her instinct is to leave, then is she really my partner?
Hmm.
Right. So my wife, So my wife is actually better at being more compartmentalized with her emotions than I am. I wear my emotions on my sleeve. It's just how I am.
I'm
That
more
doesn't
like
make a
that.
Yeah, that doesn't make a person feminine or masculine. It's just how our minds work, right? It's how we deal with things, right? My wife is definitely my rock, and so when I am having a bad day, I will share it with her. I won't dump it on her in the sense of like this or that. It's an articulation, sure, but I also got to trust that my wife is going to give me the best advice because she is my partner. You have to see your spouse as your partner, as an equal. Yeah, I got guys that are, I've talked to that are like, oh, my wife is subservient to me and stuff. That's not what I want. I wake up every day next to my wife and my daughter, and I look at them both and go, I fucking love the shit out of you. And and so my wife, I trust to talk to about my emotions because that's who you should be able to talk to about your emotions, about what's bothering you, because she should be able to do the same thing with me and talk to me about what's going on in her life and allow me the opportunity to and when you're talking to your spouse, you have to ask, are we solving problems or are we venting?
Mm.
That's very, very much an important clarification, because sometimes that person just wants to just dump and just they've had a bad day, and you're the rock that which they get to dump all that shit, and you can't take it personal. That's another thing is people don't realize in relationships can't take it personal. Emotions are as they are. That's a primitive part of our mind, our brain, that allows us to function. But we also have another part of our mind that allows us to ascend to reason and logic, the cerebral cortex. So we have to learn the ability to know the difference between when the cerebral cortex is taking over for logic versus the limbic system is taking over for emotion to react to an external stimulus. We are humans. We are full of this palette colorful palette of emotions in which we paint a picture. Um, Sometimes that picture is ugly. Sometimes that picture is very beautiful. But your partner should be able to listen to you without judgment, accept you for who you are. And if you've been in a relationship long enough, they should. But if when you talk to them about how you feel, about things happening in your life, about things that are bothering you, or when you wake up with an anxiety or whatever, if their first instinct is to run, were they really your partner?
Mm.
Is it a partnership? And it goes between both men and women. They should be able to listen to each other and talk to each other with comfort, with non-judgment, with acceptance, because that person stood in front of you with their vows and said, I'll be with you. And whatever happens, I'm here with you. I'm your partner.
Yeah. Well, and I think there's a risk associated with that with both spouses in that if you do share these things, that poses some risk. It's open yourself up to criticism and critique and risk and it's
Sure,
being
but even
vulnerable and
criticism,
exposing all of that.
but what's wrong with taking criticism from your spouse?
Yeah,
What's
nothing
wrong?
as long as it's
See,
healthy.
if it's right, right, they it should be a healthy criticism, right? Um, I do check on my wife. Everyone, are we okay? Is there something that I could be doing better? I think that's important. I think that's the husband and spouse should stop every once in a while and go, hey man, am I doing what I'm supposed to be doing? Am I doing enough? Is there something the more that you could be want? Because sometimes people bottle that shit up. Sometimes it's really hard for husband and wife to really open up to each other because you're sometimes afraid. And that's part of human emotion. That doesn't mean that that person that you're afraid to open up to is bad. It's just we all have our own shit right here. Seneca said we suffer more in imagination than we do reality. And it doesn't matter how much you trust your best friend, your teacher, your mentor, your wife, whoever is your boss, no matter what great relationship you have, you're still going to contend with this environment right here that's going to fill you full of doubt, full of insecurity. We human beings are naturally insecure creatures, naturally insecure. That goes through evolution. We've always been insecure because we're always afraid of the opinion of others because back way when we're tribal creatures, the opinion of others might have meant our exile, right? And we still carry that with us, evolutionary. Um, and so even if you do love and trust your spouse, we're going to have those insecurities because we're sometimes just locked in this shitty, hostile environment right here.
Yeah.
My wife
Yeah, it's
sometimes, my wife, go ahead.
I was just going to say it's interesting to I've delved into the concept of these attachment styles lately. I don't know if you're familiar with the idea and concept of anxious attachment styles versus avoidant attachment styles and how people respond to everyday life, respond to threats. I tend to be an anxious attachment style. So if there's an obstacle in front of me, I'm all in. And, for an avoidant who deals with it maybe internally or by keeping it at arm's length, that creates a lot of friction because the anxious needs to address it. The avoidant doesn't want to address it in the way the anxious does. And it's tough, man. It's tough. So we bring our own baggage, and there's pros and cons of both the anxious and the avoidant. But man, that baggage is tough, especially when you're partnered with somebody who it handles confrontation, we'll say, or conflict, or maybe even criticism in a different way than you do. That's a challenge.
My wife absolutely handles things um, more stoic than I do, especially, which is funny for someone who practices stoicism like I do. My wife compartmentalizes; she internalizes quite a bit,
Mm-hmm.
um, and and I have to pull it out of her. There's something I have to work on, pull it out of her. Now, a lot of people say, "Well, why should I have to pull something on my spouse?" Because why not? That's your spouse. It's the person you love, and if there's something bothering them, why not help them with it? Even if you got to pull it out of them, even if you got to reach in there and constantly like pick at it. You know there's something, and you don't want them to have to suffer in silence. No one, look, suffering. Mm, Suffering can have meaning, but suffering alone is one of the longest experiences that people really truly don't understand. See, the veteran community, we talk about suicide, depression, PTSD, and things like that. PTSD doesn't cause suicide. Loneliness causes suicide. It's one of those heartbreaking feelings a person can experience when they don't feel that their existence is warranted, that they don't feel that they are part of anything, when they feel absolutely like my existence means nothing to anybody. I should just end it. Like, that's loneliness. And so you never want your partner to feel like that. You want to drag it out, even if it's hard and hard. They're going to get mad at you. They're going to get upset at you at the end of the day when they finally communicate to you. But you also have to ask yourself, are you pulling it out of them for you, or are you pulling it out of them for them to help? And that's another thing that you have to really ask yourself. Am I pulling it out of them because of perceived anxiety that something is my fault and I want to relieve that situation, which can be considered selfish, right? Or is there something really bothering them that maybe I can help solve, right? But sometimes you just got to let them go. You just got to let them overcome it. You got to let them work through it. Some people work through it through silence, and that you have to accept that. And some people
Yeah.
work through it like you and me, who fight the anxiety. Because so what people don't understand is anxiety isn't necessarily a bad thing. We feel it's a bad thing because it makes us feel like shit, right? But
Right.
anxiety is a natural response to your brain trying to solve a perceived problem in the future. Again, that's evolutionary, right? The problem is with anxiety is it will eat at you until you try and solve that problem. And once you solve that problem, it goes to the next problem. What about this? What about that? It's about what is them inside your mind. So after a while, you got to be like, hey, look, shut the fuck up. I'm going to go do a cold bath, go PT, go to the gym. I'm going to have a sip of alcohol. I'm going to do what I can to just quiet the noise until I can figure out the most logical, rational process of this. And that's where we have to fight. We have to use the cerebral cortex of logic to fight the amygdala and the limbic system that's sitting there chewing on stuff, trying to say, hey, we have a problem. What problem is that? Well, this might happen in the future, but it hasn't happened. What the fuck are you talking about? Okay, we need to do breathing exercises. We gotta do something to get the mind to stop chewing on something. So what? We take up hobbies, we take up PT, we take up jujitsu, we take up podcasts. We do everything we can to try and distract our brain from whatever little nasty bullshit that's happening in there.
Yeah. Yeah, that I mean, there's healthy distraction techniques, right? And there's unhealthy. You said alcohol. Like I'm not gonna beat up drinking. I mean, I've been overcoming alcohol addiction over the past 8 months or so. For me, like that can't be an option. because I know where it goes. It leads to a bad place. Like you said, sip of alcohol. I don't know what a sip of anything means. Like I don't, it does not compute to me. So I have to avoid that. But at the same time, I can channel that energy towards healthy and productive outlets like the gym or jujitsu or podcasting or reaching out to friends or making to-do lists, like this is this is what I do, whatever I can do to quiet the noise. And the other thing you said, which was interesting, and I wanted to hit on this, is you said to draw it out of your spouse. And I think you alluded to this. You, I think we should evaluate our motives for doing so, because I know at times when I would try to draw it out of my ex-wife, it really wasn't actually about her, if I'm being honest. It wasn't that I wanted to help her. It was that I needed to get that information for myself. So the motive was selfish. It wasn't selfless. It wasn't me serving and leading. It was me trying to extract from the situation something I needed, not something that she needed.
If there was a problem with you, how can I solve that problem? And one of those things is, if we have to accept that people are allowed to not forgive you.
Yeah.
People are allowed to not accept your apology. People are allowed to go, no, what you did or what you said. And I'm not pertaining to you or anything like that in
Sure. No, I
general,
know what you mean.
in generalities. Um, People are allowed to say, no, what you did was fucked up and I can't accept that. And yes, I'm going to be angry. So the problem is, we human beings, we don't like it when someone doesn't think good of us. We have to get over that. But it's a human nature. People talk about, I don't give a fuck what you think. Yeah, in the end of
Yes,
the
you
day, you
do.
still do. Yes, you do. You like to say that because it makes you feel better. And we all want to be able to ignore that someone doesn't like us. But we also, as human beings with empathy, with compassion, we hate to feel like someone's mad at us because we wronged them, because we did something bad. Unless you're a narcissist or fucking sociopath, most of us feel bad because we don't want someone to feel bad because of us. And so when we're
Right.
drawing something out of our partner or drawing something out of someone that's mad at us, we want to solve that issue, but why? So sometimes it might be because, hey, look, it was a misunderstanding. I apologize, and I want you to know I didn't mean to make you feel like that. And what can I do to right the wrong? Some of us are like, I'm really anxious that the person's mad at me. Oh, you're not mad at me? Okay, cool. Whatever. Fuck your problem. See you later. Right. So we have to really ask ourselves, right? You're right. What is our motive? Do we want to solve this person's problem? Because none of us like someone feeling a bad way because something we did. Is that because we truly have empathy and compassion and realize that, yeah, we maybe fucked up? Or is it because, like, oh, good? Yeah. Oh, you got a problem, but it's not me. Fucking see you later. You want to talk about it? Oh yeah, sure. Sure. Let's talk about it. Okay, good.
Yeah.
You're good. See you later. Right. There's a difference in intent and motive, and there's a difference in actually having any compassion.
I've thought about this as it relates to people's responses. I used to think that most of what I did for myself because it was the right thing to do. Like I'm gonna buy this present for this person because it's the right thing, or I'm gonna say this thing because it's the right thing to do, or I'm gonna follow through on this commitment because it's the right thing to do. And as my world gets rocked a little bit, so by my own doing, I'll add that in there, and that's important.
Right.
Uh, I've really evaluated when the external response is taken away, you really begin to see if you're doing things for the inherent like goodness of doing it, or if you were doing it for accolades and validation. And I've
Right.
found, and it's crazy, I've found that more often than I'd like to admit, the reason I did the quote unquote right thing was because I was going to get validation, I was going to get approval, somebody was going to acknowledge it, and it was not the inherent motive of doing the right thing. It was what I would get by doing the right thing, if that makes sense.
Absolutely makes sense. It actually goes deeper than that. What do we get when we do something good for someone? When we go to the gym, when we hug somebody or make love to somebody, what are we given from our own brain? Reward
Validation.
chemicals.
Yeah, sure. Oh,
Reward
right.
chemicals.
Gotcha. Yeah.
Yeah, that validation stimulates dopamine, right? That's why we do a social media post. That's why we're trying to do good for people, right? There's a reason why it's called reward chemicals. Epinephrine, the dopamine, serotonin, and oxytocin. These are the four things that flood our system. This is what we chase after. When we're looking for, we have anxiety. It's a lack of serotonin. How do we get serotonin? Well, we try and do the easiest thing possible, right? The hard shit. That takes a lot. But the easiest way, the path of least resistance, the human way, same as electricity, path of least resistance, is we go right to something that we know is going to stimulate that or elicit that immediate reward chemical.
Yeah, we want to mainline
Alcohol,
that stuff, don't
substance,
we?
food. Yeah, food, sugars, fucking alcohol, fucking okay, I want to solve this problem right now because the feeling of anxiety is mother. It sucks, especially waking up in the middle of the night and you're having a mental ass whooping. You're having a fucking battle on the mat with your mind. And you're like, what can I do right now? What can I do to solve this? What can I do? I can either work through it, do some breathing exercises, meditation, or I can go find myself a little bit of drinky poo, have a little
Mm-hmm.
shot, try and relax it. I'm not saying that's a bad thing, right? Having a shot every once in a while to relax the nerves. Hey, look, every one of us, we're all human beings, right? But when you take it further than that, that's a problem. That is a problem. And I recognize that as a problem. Because I've had that problem myself, right? One, one is none, two is one kind of thing, like when you get,
Yep.
yeah, absolutely. I agree, So we have to understand more of our physiology. If we're going to help ourselves, our motives, our psychology, we have to understand physiology. When I started studying Stoic philosophy, I went and saw a counselor years ago, and all they did was add their back to me and just wrote notes. No one, they weren't listening to me. I went back to the old adage of like, if you want things done right, you got to do it yourself. So I fucking hit hard. I hit the philosophy, I hit psychology, and I hit physiology. I think this is important. Is the three P's. I had this conversation with Marcus Aurelius Anderson on his podcast, and he had mentioned, he's like, well, there's a fourth one, and that is practice.
Mm.
Cool and all to understand this stuff, but it's another thing to put it in practice. You can understand it, you can read it, you can preach about it, but until you practice it yourself, that's a whole different ball game right there. And
I'm
every
writing
day's a
this down here.
yeah,
Keep
every
going. Keep
day's a
going.
practice. Yeah, every day's a practice, right?
You said
That's why I got into
physiology,
philosophy
psychology, and
and philosophy.
philosophy, and then the
And when
practice
I
of it.
and when I say philosophy, I'm not talking about the fucking weird hippie shit like, yeah, man, what if like the universe and the stars and like, no, I'm talking about pragmatic, practical philosophy like Stoicism. It's a Hellenistic philosophy that came after Platonic philosophy. You have skepticism, Stoicism, and Cynicism. They also have Epicureanism, which they misattribute to like hedonism, like the Christians talk about, oh, that's hedonic and all this stuff. Actually, is more rational, logical as well. But when it comes to Stoicism, um, when it comes to being a good man or being a good partner, there's four cardinal virtues in Stoicism that for Christians out there listening to this will go, oh yeah, I've heard this before. And that is wisdom, courage, justice, and temperance. And that's also my standard for masculinity, being a man. So let's talk about, right? So
Before you
courage.
get in, hold on. Before you get into that, I do want to ask you a question that, in
Sure.
fact, this question came up last week when we do our Ask Me Anything for the podcast. And it
Yeah.
seems like one that gets brought up a lot because you talk about stoicism and then you also just mentioned Christianity. There's a lot of people out there that believe for one reason or the other, and I actually don't know what the dilemma or the conflict is, that if you're a practicing Christian, then you should not be practicing stoicism. I think they overlap nicely. I can't see the disconnect, but it seems like there's a lot of men who have asked me about this question. I'm curious what your take on that is.
I have been on Instagram lives where I just mentioned stoicism, and oh
I
man,
know.
it was anathema. It was absolutely anathema. What the problem is when we are seeking virtue, when we are seeking both the practice of of ensuring our place in the afterlife, right? Um, right. The idea that getting into heaven is being a good person, living a good life. Um, Stoicism and Christianity actually overlap quite a bit. Um, this is going man, this is going to cause a little bit of drama, right? So you
Bring it
can
on.
actually go,
Bring it on.
you can actually look up Stoicism and Christianity. In fact, Thomas Aquinas. don't know if you ever heard the term Thomism. As a practice of philosophy, Thomas Aquinas is a big name in the Catholic Church, along with Plato. Actually, believe it or not, but Plato had a very, very large influence on the Catholic Church, and so did Thomas Aquinas. Thomas Aquinas was one of the greatest known philosophers out there, and he was Saint Aquinas, right? He was so much important that they sanctified. They gave him sainthood. But Thomas Aquinas talked about natural free will, natural will, God's will, right? For the longest time, I was agnostic, borderline atheist. Um, Stoicism actually helped me find my way back to God, not through faith. Faith is a gift. Faith is an absolute gift. To be able to put your faith into something and not have to worry about something because you feel that your faith, oh, man, what a beautiful gift. And something that I've always been envious of. And those out there should treasure it, love it, hold on to it, and never question it. I have been given the gift of reason, right? I used to ask myself, I said, everything happens according to reason. The Stoics say according to nature. But when they talk about the Stoics use the term logos quite a bit, and Christians adopted it. Logos means the word. The word of who? That was a question of mine. It was like, that's one that got me. It was like, everything happens according to reason. Whose reason? Oh, shit. Oh, that's a great question. Whose reason? Because reason doesn't exist without intent. Intent by who? All right. So we ask ourselves, is God according to reason, or is God the product of reason, or is God create reason? And so I asked
I
myself, I said,
believe
well, if
that.
God,
I was going to say, I believe that, but also I'm trying to look at it from the other perspective. Maybe it's not reason. Maybe it's just the natural order of things, as in nature has just worked out an efficient way of operating and operates by principles.
well, that's been a long debated topic, right? Theology is such a hotly debated topic, right? And even within the same theology, like Christians disagree with Christians, Muslims disagree with Muslims, right?
Right.
Sunni, Shia, right? How you practice this, who you believe in is different. And because if you don't believe the way I do, you're a bad person.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, that's interesting. Same with Christianity, Baptist, Methodist, Lutheran. I come from northern Minnesota, Scandinavian. We love our Lutheranism. Most are Lutherans because Martin Luther went north. Martin Luther was excommunicated from the Catholic Church, right? He started his own. You got Episcopalians, Catholic light as well, right? So you have all these different things, and everyone says, if you don't believe the way I do, then Jesus is going to put you in hell, or God's going to put you in hell, or you're not practicing it right, or the right way. I have a friend of mine who, him and I go back and forth. He's a wonderful man. I respect him so much. He's not a big fan of my use of Stoicism because Christians believe you put all your faith in God, in Jesus,
Mm.
and that is your way to heaven. Only through Jesus can you go to heaven. Which, hey, fair enough. I love me some Jesus. I absolutely do. Whether it's the man or the deity, right? Good guy, absolutely wonderful guy. You can't argue that. Wonderful guy. Um, but philosophy is a love of wisdom. That's what philosophy is. Philo, love, Sophie, wisdom.
Hmm.
Why couldn't we see Jesus as a philosopher? As a philosopher of religion, just the same way we saw Thomas Aquinas as a philosopher for the church. Right? Why can't we accept philosophy, the love of wisdom? Jesus was a very wise man. So was Thomas Aquinas. So was many people in our history. The Stoics were polytheists. Well, I'll correct that. Stoics believe Zeus as the one true God. The Greek, I'm sorry, the Roman ones,
So
right?
I was going to
They
say,
believe,
you're using that, you're saying that broadly, but that's not broadly applicable, is it? Stoicism, their god is Zeus. Is that what you're saying?
well, I mean, if you look at the time, 2,500 years ago. right? Romans believed. I mean, you have Greek Stoics and you have Roman Stoics, and there's a split at a certain point where Romans adopted Stoicism and went about their way, and Greeks practiced it. The early Greeks practiced it, right? Like Zeno, and those guys, Crispus, and they were the Greek Stoics, and then the Romans picked it up later on because there was so much influence between the two, Italian and Greek
Mm.
cultures being there, right? You
Okay.
see the
Yeah.
architecture, you can see a philosophy and things like that, right? So the gods are interchangeable, but in the end of the day, I mean, the early ones were polytheistic, and believe it or not, the later Roman Stoics became monotheistic, more about Zeus. And hey, that's the true God. But they use the term logos interchangeably, like things happen according to nature. That's what the Stoics had talked about, according to nature. But then they would also reference Zeus, or they would reference God, or they would reference Logos, right? It was mostly interchangeable, right? There is something out there. Basically, when it boils down to that is a divine designer, and that you should put your trust in your reason. Because the way they saw it was the Logos is according to reason. And because we human beings have a brain capable of reason, we possess a share in the divine. Divinity, what that means to other people, that's varies between religions. and
Well, even
and
even people who don't believe in God, you hear them talk about divinity in an interesting way. They use terms like the universe or karma is another one. And they'll
it
use
all
these
comes.
terms. And then when you hear it, you're like, well, you're define that for me. And they tell me what they mean. I'm like, okay, well, that's what I understand God to be. So you say you don't believe in God, but you do believe in a higher being. You're just calling it the universe, some cosmic force with some sort of intelligence that's guiding and directing. That's God. They have a hard
So let
time
me
saying that. They'd rather use the term universe or karma or any other, fill in the blank type terms.
and my question is, so the way I call it is intellectual intent. There's intellectual intent by something, right? There's an intellectual being out there, whether it's the universe is intellectual being of some sorts, right? I can't describe that. It's the same way I can't describe God. But I'm okay with them not believing God if they believe the universe, if they believe in something that makes
Sure.
them
Yeah.
feel good about their death, but also gives them a reason to be a good person, right?
Yes.
Karma is intent. Karma, right? The Buddhists believe in karma, or is it Hindus? Apologize, forgive me if I'm culturally incorrect on that one. But karma, we know, is if you do wrong, wrong will happen back to you instantaneously or for the 3 years, right? Same thing with Christians. If you do wrong now, you'll answer for it when you die. Same thing with Muslims. You do wrong now, you'll answer for it in front of their deity, whether it's Muhammad or whether it's Allah, which is an Abrahamic language. Jews, Christians, and Muslims all share the same idea of God. I know that's going to create anathema. Oh my gosh. And we're all Abrahamic. We're a Christian, Jew, or Muslim. You're an Abrahamic
Well, and
religion.
isn't the in Muslim, look, I'm not
Islam,
researched or studying
Islam,
this. Islam
Allah is just another word for God,
recognizes Jesus as
a
a
prophet.
prophet, right? And vice
Correct.
versa, Muhammad is a prophet. Like it's,
Mhm.
so
Yeah. So, I mean, in all that, when it comes down to Stoicism, I mean, if you look at Islam during the Dark Ages, Christian Dark Ages, Islam is responsible for beautiful creation of some philosophical orders. They created the number zero. And we know math comes from philosophy as well. Pythagoras was a philosopher, right? And during the Christian Dark Ages, when they were, going after each other because you didn't believe my way of celebrating Jesus or whatever it was Islam that held on to philosophy, that
hmm.
held on to Plato, Socrates, and Aristotle. They held on to math, science. They held on to all these things. So every religion, I think, plays a big part in the creation and celebration of wisdom. That's what it comes down to is wisdom, being a wise person. what philosophy is a pragmatic philosophy, and for the four cardinal virtues of wisdom, courage, justice, and temperance, it's the same for Christians. They still believe in that. If you talk to Masons, one of their four cardinal virtues, wisdom, courage, justice, and temperance. I think we can all universally get along. Wisdom is knowing what's in your control, what's out of your control. Don't worry about what's out of your control. Worry about what's in your control, your emotions, and subsequently your actions.
Mm.
Courage, action in the face of adversity. Simple. It doesn't have to get any more complicated than that. It's action in the face of adversity. This bothers me, but I'm still going to go forward with it because I know it's the right thing to do, because I know what's within my control. I'm going to use wisdom to help me with this courage, to act in the face of adversity, right? Justice. So when we talk about justice in Stoicism, we're not talking about malum in se or malum prohibitum or anything like that within man's legal. We're talking about how you treat people, how people treat you, how you even treat people despite how they treat you. Justice is kindness, dignity, respect. I had this conversation with somebody recently. I talked, it's like, well, my ex-wife is trying to weaponize my kids against me. And my kids say all sorts of horrible things to me that my ex-wife says about me. And I want to respond back. I want to tell them, it's like, but why? What's the point? Why not hold the moral high ground, the virtue high ground? Why not embrace virtue and say, you know what? If your mother feels that way about me, then she's right to say it. But I love your mother and I think she's a good person. And despite her feelings against me, that's her feelings. Your feelings are your own, and you're allowed to adopt that. If you think that what your mother says is true, then I can't control that. I can tell you otherwise. But it's treating people with kindness, dignity, respect, regardless of how they treat you, because it's not just for them. It's for your peace. It's for in
Mm.
here. No matter
Yeah.
what it is, it's about you saying, you know what, I'm going to embrace virtue. I'm going to embrace the good because I have the capability for both reason and evil. And evil is rejection of reason, right? That's not to say having emotions are evil. Of course not. Emotions are good. Love, that's a great emotion, right? We love our children, right? We don't reject love because it's simple emotion. We embrace emotion when it's appropriate. The people talk about stoicism, they think it's the rejection of emotion, like you're going to be
Right.
Spock. No, that
Right.
is that is a complete misrepresentation of stoicism. Stoicism is the objective view of emotions are happening and your ability to act under the influence of reason despite those emotions, right? So
Mm.
we know logically that we should never act under the influence of drugs or alcohol, clouds or judgment. Same thing with emotions. Emotions cloud our mind. Same thing with this illicit. If you elicit serotonin, dopamine, epinephrine, and oxytocin, we feel great about ourselves, but we still make decisions on the influence of those that will lead to negative outcomes, right? So if we embrace logic and reason, and this is where physiology comes in now, we embrace the cerebral cortex part of our brain and say, all right, I'm going to embrace logic. What are some things that I can do to embrace the logic of the situation? Well, Seneca said, we are more frightened and hurt. We suffer more in imagination than we do reality. That's a beautiful piece of logic. It's as simple as it is. It's very profound. It's something you have to remind yourself, because when you're fearing the future, when you're fearing something else, you go, I'm just imagining that right now. That's tomorrow's problem. Today, if I want to find peace, I embrace what I'm happening right now. I can fear
Or even
tomorrow.
even something on a like a micro level. I think about, conversations you might have with somebody, or maybe your spouse does something or a friend does something, and then you make up this story in your mind about how evil they are and they're out to get you. And the quote that comes to mind is, never attribute to malice what could be attributed to stupidity. But I would also say just their perception and your own perception. But then what happens, at least for me, is, let's say I feel slighted by you, Brady. So I go to you like a mature man would do, and I say, hey, Brady, you did or said this thing, and I didn't appreciate that. Can you help me understand what was happening there? And you explain it. I'm like, oh, got it. Completely misread the
And
situation.
that is an adult conversation that we need to have with each other as human beings, but we don't, because what we think is, they slighted me, I'm either going to get revenge or I'm going to let it fester in my mind like
Yes.
an infection. I'm gonna get worse and worse. I'm gonna make up all these scenarios. Oh, yeah, I bet you would do this. I bet you would do that. I bet you
Yeah.
would say this, right? And then we actually get the courage, actually in the face of adversity, and go, "Hey, Ryan, look, man, you said this, and this made me feel a certain way." Now you can respond in one, two ways. You're like, "Oh, please, let's expound upon it. Tell me about it. Please let me how can I make this right? Okay, I don't feel like this was my fault. I think this was a misunderstanding, a miscommunication, and I would love to square this away with you. Please, thank you so much for bringing it to my attention. Because I think as adults, we should appreciate when someone brings something to us, when someone says, "Hey, this made me feel a certain way." All right, great. It takes maturity and logic on both sides to be able to do that. But what happens? Ryan, this may be probably okay. Well, that's your problem, not my fucking problem. Go
Yeah.
fucking deal
Screw
with it.
off.
Don't be a little bitch, right? That's not justice. That's not the stoic justice that I'm talking about. That's nasty. That's shitty. That's nasty human behavior. That is you being defensive, not you. Please, this is a scenario, right?
Right.
For those listening, right?
Sure. Yeah,
There's
we get
nothing
it.
between me or. By the way, for those listening, there's nothing between you and we have
Yeah,
no
there's
mutual
no
respect. This is
backstory here on
yeah,
this.
yeah, no, there's no secret backstory. This is us having a conversation as man to man and role playing. This is role playing. Some of you men and women, you know what I'm talking about. All right, so um, but when someone goes to you and says, I have a problem, they're like, go fuck yourself. Then the problem at that point isn't with you. That's actually
Yeah.
that's a problematic response. That is a red flag. That is whoa, whoa, whoa. I'm trying to bring something to you. I want as friends, as partners, as spouses. I want to bring this to you and communicate this with you. No, that's your fucking problem, not mine. Whoa.
Yeah. Good
Hey,
point.
that's a different. That's not a friendship. That's a relationship. That's not a partnership. That is. Whoa, wait a second. There's an adversarial nature there that we have no idea existed, right? Um, so I think as adults, right, and this is what Stoicism has taught me, is that when I have an issue, someone, Marcus really said, I can either bring it up to him and correct him gently or not. But if I let it fester in my own mind, if I don't bring it to them, that's my problem, not their problem. It only becomes their problem when you've actually brought it up to them. And even that point, you have to come at it unemotional, even though it's an inherently emotional subject, right? You have to come at logical and not be accusatory. You have to come and say, "Hey, can we chat real quick about something that you said or did the other day that strung something with me? And I want to clarify. I really do. Communication is such a key thing in our society that I think from short word text and text messages and stuff like that we've dumbed down our communication, our
Oh
ability to
yeah.
communicate
Big time.
exponentially, right? People say stuff and I'm like, what? Give me context, right? And I'm like, you want to get, this and this. I'm like, thank you. I needed context. Look, I'm not the brightest guy in the world. Look, I'm kind of an idiot. I had ADHD, I'm not great, but I have things simplified for me. I'm a Marine. I need simplification. I need context. And what's the other thing I think our society has lost is the ability to combine intent and context when it comes to conversation, when it comes to anything in our society, what does that mean? Right? Oh, they meant this. You can't logically infer what someone meant if they didn't say that. You
Well, I
have
don't
to
think,
clarify context and intent. You know what I mean?
and I
You
think
can't
it'll,
infer
yes,
because
but in a
people
lot of those
infer intent.
cases, it's
Yeah.
in a lot of those cases, it actually is malicious. People playing dumb so that they can, prove their point or argue,
But that's still
their side of the
inference.
equation. But that's not
Right.
ignorance. That's they're deliberately doing that. They're
But how
misconstruing
do you
words and messaging.
right. People do that. But you have to clarify. Before you can infer that, you actually have to make an attempt to clarify before you can make an
Yes,
inference, right? We have to,
sure.
our society is so bad at inferring things. Well, this means that. How do you know?
Hmm.
Did you talk to him? Did you ask him? What knowledge do you have that gives you evidence towards that? We need to start looking towards evidence, start looking towards education, start looking towards, actual logic and reason, because I might want to infer something, but is that the logical part of my brain or is that the emotional part of my brain looking for something?
Yeah,
Right,
usually
Victor?
emotional.
It's usually emotional, right? So now we're creating drama. We're creating a conflict, a confrontation based under the influence of emotion rather than logic or reason. And look, again, I'm not saying emotion is a bad thing. It's about how it's applied, about how it's used. Can emotion be weaponized? Oh, absolutely. Every day, our society weaponizes emotion to try and manipulate people. Absolutely. And we should recognize it. We should also seek to understand it more. The why. I used to get that try. That used to get me in trouble so many times in the Marine Corps. Why? I started asking differently. What's mission accomplishment?
I bet they love
Right?
that.
Yeah. Oh man, I was a terminal lance for a long time until I picked up corporal, and the people that try to non-rec me for corporal, I actually pinned me on.
Yeah, I bet. I bet that
Yeah.
was
So yeah,
because that's the way we've always done
because
it. It's
we done it right.
tradition. This is what we do.
And when it comes to every day, we have to evolve every single day. I tell men and women, go to bed a better person than when you woke up.
Hmm.
And I'm not talking about major change. It doesn't have to be major change. You can one more push up that you did the other day that betters yourself. Every day that you breathe, when you breathe in, breathe out, is a chance for you to better yourself. Go to bed a better person than when you woke up. And you know what? Okay, so you weren't perfect that day. You get to wake up again the next day and do it again and try. We're still worried about people being better, but we're not worried about ourselves being better. Like I'll be honest with you, man. I've been an asshole before. And once I embraced Stoicism hard in the last 2 years, I started waking up myself and really trying to be a better man for my wife, for my daughter, for myself. I've been an obnoxious person, and sometimes I am still obnoxious. I've been overzealous. I portrayed an overzealous person, right? Because likes, clicks, shares, and algorithms. At the end of the day, you have to ask yourself why. A lot of my content now is I've been told in tactical community I share a plate with a steak and the vegetables. No one likes eating the vegetables. They just know it's good for them. Everyone likes a steak. That's shooting multicam tactical fucking shit, throwing knives and tomahawks and all sorts of stuff, right? But when it comes to philosophy and stoicism, I've managed to find a way to apply stoicism to tactical community because if we're able to use logic in everything that we do, whether it's being the gray man, which is adopting a survival strategy, um, or trying to clear a room, or reacting to a shot going off, or an instance where someone is attacked, we have the ability to react rationally despite our emotions. Viktor Frankl was a Holocaust survivor, and he watched his parents walk into a gas chamber, and his wife died in one of the gas chambers, which you never know. He actually used his wife to keep him alive the whole time. He had these imaginary conversations with her. Uh, but he wrote a book called Man's Search for Meaning, which gives credence to logotherapy. Viktor Frankl said, this is one of my favorite quotes, is, between stimulus and response, there's space. And in that space, you have the power to choose. And that power to choose lies your growth and your freedom. At the end of the day, no matter what, whether facing death, we have the choice of how we're going to feel about it. No one can take that away from you. No one can take away your character. No one can take away how you feel. You let them, absolutely. When I talked about that palette of human emotions, right? This palette of human emotions is a colorful palette, and we paint our own pictures. But when you give your mind to someone else and let them upset you, you take offense to something, then they begin to paint a picture that you don't want to be painted. They get to control your emotions and use those colors to paint an image of yourself that you're not going to like. But Viktor Frankl, Answers for Meaning.
It's a
And
great
so
book.
what I'm talking about, and he said, and what that quote is, that's actual physiology. That's not just a wonderful quote. That's actual physiology. Between stimulus and response, you have space. There's two routes that information takes. And I guarantee people are going to start rolling their eyes right now, start going to sleep, knock on. All right, we're talking about science, right? But that's an actual physiological response. So in your brain, the limbic system, you have two routes that information takes. That's the short route and the long route. The short route is thalamus to amygdala, right? Stimulus, response. Your amygdala is responsible for your behavioral output. That's the last part of your mind that information travels. Amygdala is also responsible for trauma and training, implicit memory, and procedural memory. This is second nature. This dumb it down, second nature. Even more simplest terms, muscle memory, right? There
Got it.
is really no such thing
Right.
as muscle memory. I mean, the cells still have cellular memory, right? People say there's no such thing as muscle memory. They know that's right. They don't know why that's right. It's actually called procedural memory. When you learn
Well, they're not
something over
cognizant,
and
right?
over. Yeah. where
Right.
you over and over and over and over again, it becomes second nature to you, like picking up a rifle, or someone just put me in an arm bar. Here's how I'm going to maneuver this. Right? They become
Right.
second nature after a while. So that's stimulus response, right? The other route that information takes, and I use this example, right? When someone comes behind you and jolts you, you turn around and get into a judo stance, right? That's stimulus response. That's thamos to amygdala. Thamos. I pronounce for those scientists out there. I apologize. Please forgive me for butchering it. Right.
They'll let you know. They'll let you know.
But oh, I'm sure they will. But thamos to amygdala, and then you got the long routes, which goes what I call the logic filters, the logic routes, and that is to sensory cortex, sight, hearing, taste, touch, but not smell. Smell is actually a whole different way. It's connected right to your amygdala. And then you go to your hippocampus. Hippocampus part of your limbic system is responsible for contextual memory. Contextual memory like names, faces, things like that. And then it gets filtered into your amygdala, right? So now you've scared me. You come up behind you, you come up behind me, and I'm like ready to fucking pop you in the throat or draw my fire, whatever it is. So let's say I'm going to pop you in the throat, right? But as that information starts getting into my hippocampus, the contextual memory, I recognize, oh, it's my friend. But in that
Mm-hmm.
split second, I still have the choice to pop that fucker in the face, teach him a lesson, but I'm not going to because it's my buddy. Right. So that is stimulus. So when I talk about Viktor Frankl, when he says in stimulus response, you have space. That space is that long route. Now that space doesn't have to happen within a thousandth of a second. It could take a second, it could take a minute, it could take an hour, it could take a week, but you get to decide your response. If you learn to control it, if you use philosophy right, if you understand your physiology and your psychology, if you practice and you read and you research and you study and you do the work yourself, you begin to then control how you're going to respond to situations. But in the end, you have to remember, as I would say, you can't control the outcome.
Hmm.
When the outcome happens, you can either accept it and learn from it as a
Do
tool,
something different. Sure.
do something different, right? Learn from it, right? Or when it does happen, celebrate. Okay, good. This worked out the way I wanted to. Okay, let's go back and analyze, debrief. Why did it work out the way I wanted to? The Stoics say you got to be indifferent. You got to be indifferent to the outcome, and realize that one is part of character development, and the other, well, it happened according to nature, which is so hard, and that's where faith comes in, which is
Yeah.
funny. As a man talk about, I use reason probably in replace of faith. And I think maybe sometimes the two could be one and the same, right? And that's such a different type of conversation. And I know there's Christians listening right now that are shaking their heads, but look, bear with me, guys. Look, it's in the end of the day, what allowed you to live a good life, to be at peace, to be happy. And look, you're not guaranteed happiness, right? Happiness comes and goes. The rest is character development. And I've had people ask me the same, like you're an unhappy person, and I was like, I'm happy for the most part. And I said the other part, I said character development. There's nothing
Hmm.
wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with 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 going through adversity. There's nothing wrong with growing up and learning and being a different person. Who you are yesterday is not who you are today. Who you were a week ago, it's not who you are today. Who you were 6 months ago, 6 years ago. You're allowed to grow. You're allowed to change. We're all fucking, we're all human beings. We've all said or done dumb stuff, said dumb stuff, but what makes you better as a person is you cringe at the dumb stuff and go, man, that was fucking stupid. That was
Yeah.
stupid. Or I said something stupid. Or man, that was really savage. I shouldn't. And the moment you begin to cringe at your past is the moment you go, I've grown, I've learned, I've become different. It's funny as my favorite thing is like Facebook memories. Facebook memories will allow you to relive your past and go, damn, did I say that?
Yeah.
Holy shit. What the fuck
Right.
was I thinking? Right. And you go, God, yeah. And so,
But it's
it,
funny because people will also hold you to it. They're like, oh, well, 5 years ago you said, well, yeah, that was 5 years ago. And I'm 5 years older. I have 5 years worth of experiences. So if my perception of my 5 year younger version of myself hasn't changed, what in the world have I been doing with the last 5 years? This is why I get
That's a
frustrated when
great,
people say, "Oh, he's flip flopping on the issue." It's like, is he, or is he just matured and is looking
as
at
he
it differently
changed.
now?
You're allowed to change your mind. I think my favorite response is saying, "You said this 5 years ago." I did. I did. And thank you for telling me that. And you know what? 5 years ago, I was a different person, a lesser version of myself, and I've grown. And I appreciate you telling me that. And that's a good reminder. And I feel like I've changed. And if you don't accept that change, well, that's fine
Right.
because I'm a better person than I was 5 years ago, better person I was 2 years ago, better person I was 6 months ago, 6 weeks ago, 6 days ago. Right. And that's why I say, don't be afraid to go to bed a better person than you woke up. Seek to change something. Seek to change your mind. Every day you should be looking to change your mind about something. That doesn't mean you have to accept it, right? What is it? Einstein said that the mark of intelligence is entertaining an idea without fully accepting it.
Mm-hmm.
All right, there's
Mm-hmm.
nothing wrong with that. The problem today that I have, and this might get political, is that one side thinks it was too much emotion, and one side thinks it was too much religion, and neither think that's wrong. And that's where I try and find myself in the center, try and find myself in the middle. That's where the last part of the four virtues is temperance, which I think is probably the most important virtue that any man or woman can practice, and that is moderation. Moderation in all things, your thinking, moderation, your food, your diet, your exercise, your love, your politics, your ideology, your religion, your feelings. There's nothing wrong with moderation. There's nothing wrong with temperance. There's nothing wrong with questioning what you believe in every day. We should strive for social independence. We should strive to be independent of what the mob, the hive mind is. We should seek to um, be confident in ourselves and find self-love. And I think that's where freedom comes. And I know it sounds hippie, it's a hippie trope. You just gotta love yourself, bro. But it's fucking true, man. You gotta love yourself. You gotta find confidence in yourself. You can't be afraid to set yourself aside from society as long as it follows virtue, as long as it follows within wisdom, courage, justice, and temperance. As long as you're trying to be a good person objectively, universally, there's nothing wrong with stepping aside and saying, I don't like the way you think. And I'm choosing to remind myself. And look in your society, you see politics, you see people remove themselves, and what happens? They become ostracized, become exiled. Today, back in the day, exile meant something different. Like the philosophers, Roman emperors hated fucking philosophers. They exiled the motherfuckers like it was left and right. Nero and Caligula and all these. They're like, get the fuck out of here. You are poisoning the mind of the people.
Right.
There's something called a Stoic resistance. Stoic resistance was like, yo, let's put some stoicism into politics, not politics into stoicism, but stoicism into politics, and get these emperors to think virtuously. That's what Marcus Aurelius was. Marcus Aurelius was an emperor. For those who know, Plato had described the perfect king was the philosopher king, and Marcus Aurelius is about as close as you can get. Now, Christians are listening, going, well, he persecuted Christians. No, he didn't. He didn't. That was a couple other emperors. I wasn't. He was indifferent. In fact, actually, there's a Stoic philosopher that confirms the existence of Paul. His name is Gallio or Gallio, and Gallio was the one that the Jews brought Paul before to have him persecuted. And Gallio was like, "No, fuck that. It's not my problem." And then the Jews began to beat the shit out of Paul. But Gallio's biological brother was Seneca the Younger,
Hmm.
one of the most notable, and they exist together. And it's an outside source that really confirms the existence of Gallio and the timeline for Paul. There's a lot of overlapping between Stoicism, but I don't think you should see Stoicism doesn't preach against God. More often than not, it actually preaches for a God. What God you choose, they didn't really care about. For them, it was about Stoicism is just finding peace here on earth and living a good life and living, according to Logos. And the Logos, as Christians will know, means the Word of God. What's wrong with that? I don't see anything wrong with it.
Yeah.
What makes you a wiser person that treats other people with kindness, and dignity and respect? I don't see that against religion. I don't see that against
Yeah.
Christianity. I don't see it against Islam. I see it as something that enhances. It's complementary to the practice. It's about wisdom. That's all it is, and living a good life.
Well, it is interesting, sometimes when you hear that conflict that, well, it conflicts with the word of God, it's like, okay, well, you listen to your pastor every Sunday. Does that conflict with the word of God because it isn't God's exact word? Now, it may be a representation of it, maybe an interpretation of it, but you're still
It's an
listening to your
interpretation.
pastor.
Sure. And I'm doing the same
So,
thing with Stoicism. I'm interpreting the
right,
words of the Stoics and applying it to what I feel is the correct way of application. That's my feeling of it. That's my subjective view of it, right?
and it will
You
change,
have, yeah, you have pastors that read from the Bible and then they expound upon it. It's just
right, with their own
expounding. That's all it
experiences.
is.
Yeah,
It's expounding it. They're taking and trying to relate it in a more palatable format for people to understand. Because if you look at some of the ways the Bible is written, you're like, oh, oh my God. Wow, okay, I got to read this just a couple times, and the same
right.
thing with some philosophy. You're like, what
What
did
is
he
he
just say?
talking about?
What are you
Yeah,
talking? So what those pastors are doing, and there's I got nothing against it. As long as you're not preaching against people, right? You're preaching for the treatment and the humanity of people, and living a good life, and saying, hey, yeah, okay, I will read the words of Jesus as it was relayed by others in the Bible, Paul, Mark, the Romans. Romans is my favorite. Romans talks about treating everyone as your brother and loving each other as your brother. And look, Psalms 23 fucking slaps. Psalms 23 is, I will walk through the valley of shadow of death. I will fear no evil. That fucking slaps. That is, you want to get hair on the back of your neck one day, read that. As a Psalms 23 or Psalms 24, I forgot. I think it's 23. But that being said, man, you read through the Bible, you can find a lot of hope. You can find a way to relieve your anxiety. And that's, as they say, accepting through Jesus. But I try to complement that through philosophy, through the works of great men like Marcus Aurelius and Seneca and Viktor Frankl and Epictetus or Cato the Younger. For those of us that are more libertarian, Cato the Younger said, "I swear to God, if if Julius Caesar gets elected president or Roman emperor, I'm gonna kill myself," and he did. He straight up opened his veins up and said, "Fuck this! I'd rather die than live under a tyrant." He was a savage. Then you got Musonius Rufus, who I call the prepper stoic, who said the closest thing to living by philosophy is living to the land, is tending to your land. Who also,
hmm.
if you read Musonius Rufus, there's a book called it's obviously a translation. It's called I forgot what it's called, but I'll send it to you later. But he literally he rips on those. He says, cut your hair like you would cut the leaves of a tree because it's distracting. But don't you fucking cut your beard because that is a feminine thing. That is a woman thing to do. Don't you cut your beard for appearances. Don't shape your beard because that's not for your beard is for purpose. You don't shave your beard. You don't trim your beard. You don't manicure your beard. That is for a purpose, right? Cut your hair because it might distract you, like you would cut limbs from a tree. Don't you dare cut your foot. It is funny. It is some
That's
savage shit. Like,
awesome.
whoa, holy shit, dude, you went on right field on that one. So it's fun, kind of, and you
That's
got to
funny.
remember this stuff was 2,500 years ago. I
Yeah,
mean,
of
people thought
course.
differently. I always tell people it was like, why? And people ask, well, why does philosophy exist? It's because they didn't have pills. They had watered down wine, and they're trying to figure out why their life sucked. 2,500 years ago, life was fucking hard.
They got some
They had
some time on
plagues.
their hands to think.
Yeah, they got plagues. They got shit happening to them. They got Gauls coming in, fucking them up all the time. The Visigoths, the Vikings, the Vangarians hitting the Mediterranean. Right, life was hard back then. It was.
Yeah,
How do you
no
make it feel
doubt.
so? Well, you got watered down wine, you got philosophy, and that is what you got. Um, and so, and it's funny is look, feel what you want, but let your path to be a better man or be a woman, be a better woman, be your God, and don't let anyone stray you off of it. Right? What makes you feel good about yourself, what makes you love yourself, and what makes you treat other people better. Don't let people fuck with you about it. Don't let that's not for that. No one gets to decide how you feel about yourself. No one gets to decide your path. No one gets to tell you, and the entitlement of other people telling you, well, if you don't believe the way I believe, fuck you. Or if you don't feel the way I feel, you're a bad person. They don't get to decide that. No one gets, I mean, objectively speaking, pedophile, murderer,
Right.
abuser, right?
Morality. Right.
That's
Sure.
yeah, we're talking, but on an everyday face to face where you just wake up and you're like, man, how do I go sleep a better person? How do I be a better man to my wife, or how to be a better wife to my husband, or a better father to my child, a better mother to my child, or better sibling, or a better friend, right? Find your path and love your path, accept it for what it is, and don't let anyone tell you otherwise and tell you you're a bad person because you don't believe the way they do or feel the way they do. No one gets to tell you that. You got to love yourself. You got to find confidence in yourself. If you're always worried about what people think of others, right? We said in earlier in the podcast, it's like you're going to, it's part of human nature. But at the end of the day, the only person you have to answer to is yourself. The only person you have to look at in the morning when you get up in the mirror is fucking you. And you got to like what looks back at you, because if you don't, it's hard. Open the Bible, open the Quran, open the Torah, read the works of Buddha, read the works of the Hindus, read the works of the Greeks, the Romans. Find something that makes you happy, because at the end of the day, when you die, they're going to forget about you.
Yeah. No
Even
doubt.
people, even Marcus Aurelius says, when you're on your deathbed, there's people that love you that are going to still say, finally. You got to love yourself, man, because no one else in the world is going to have your back more than you.
I think about that with the podcast. I thought, if something were to happen to me prematurely and I died, a bunch of people would be upset for like 2 weeks, and then they'd find another podcast to replace.
Dude, you will be replaced. You will
If
stick your.
that,
I
I
tell
said
people,
two
yeah,
weeks. That's
stick your
probably too
finger.
long.
Yeah. Well, your boy's doing great. You've taught your boy um, your talent. You've taught him your charisma. You taught him how to speak and communicate, and how to. And that's what your podcast. That's why it's so successful. Is you brought people on, and you've learned how to communicate with people. You learned a lot. You learned how to articulate what people are saying that really strikes something in somebody, that sparks emotion. I mean, what podcasts are is an appeal to someone's ideology, their
Yeah,
feelings, their
definitely.
emotions. Right? Your boy is definitely doing a great job, and further that. Um, and the thing is, like, yeah, in the end of the day, it doesn't matter what I say or who I affect positively or negatively. It's not going to matter. What does it really matter? People forget. People die. Those. You know, you'll be forgotten eventually. There's nothing wrong with that. What matters most is, how did you affect people right now that made them better, that
Yeah.
made them feel better, that made them truly, like, you know, break the sexual tension between a gun in their forehead. You know what I mean? What did you do that made someone say, I'm going to live another day. I'm going to be a better person today. Or, you know what, today I feel better so much about myself because I got to hear the words of another person that meant something to me. And whatever I say here, if it doesn't apply to you, then that's okay. If it does apply to you, I'm glad. And I hope you reach out. And I hope you say, hey man, thank you. Or hey man, I disagree with you. Oh, even better. Why do you disagree with me? Please tell me.
Mm-hmm.
Articulate in a logical, rational way why you disagree with me. So I can learn. I want to learn. I want to hear the thoughts of others. I want to hear the philosophy of others, because, you know, why not? What's bad about hearing the thoughts of others? What's wrong with hearing disagreement of others? Why is it so people, it's anathema to people to hear an opinion different from theirs that disagrees, right? Fucking bring it on, please tell me. I mean, don't yell at me, don't scream at me, don't shit on me, don't be an
Right.
asshole
With
about it, but
justice,
say,
like
hey
you said
man,
earlier.
yeah, reach out, logic and reason, have a adult conversation. Hey man, I disagree with you, and here's why. Fuck, I want to hear it, because if I get to learn, fucking absolutely, that's a
Yeah.
great day. I got to better myself. Disagreement just means you got to better yourself.
Well, Brady, hey, tell the guys where to connect with you. Obviously, a lot more to go here. The information you
Is it
share
an
in your
hour already?
videos,
Holy
it's
shit.
yeah, it's over. But it's no, it's great. Man, the information you share and the way that you share it it speaks to me, and I know it'll speak to a lot of guys as well. So tell the guys where to connect, where to learn more, and where to go.
I got a website, bradypesola.com, but that's still under construction because one of these days I'll actually follow my ADHD and finish it. But simple as it is, I'm just on Instagram, grayman.project, and that's where you find me most of the time. So grayman.project on Instagram. That's where I'm at. Yeah.
Right on. We'll sync it all up. Brady, appreciate you, man. Good to get to know you. Glad to have this conversation, and looking forward to getting to the guys.
Likewise, Ryan, much love to you, and thank you again.